Located in southern Alberta, the Confederacy consists of 4 tribes: the Blood Tribe, known as Kainai, Sitsiga, Piikani, and the South Piikani in the U.S. Many First Nations are migrating to urban centers. This is Lethbridge, Alberta. The Blood Tribe was recently called a state of emergency. The community has been hit hard with another deadly drug known as tranq. This drug is more deadly than previous fentanyl and carfentanil. The rate of overdose death related to Blood Tribe members has increased dramatically.
So my name is Katrina Houghton-Backfat. I'm a registered psychologist from Siksika Nation. I work primarily in trauma and how that presents in Indigenous communities. My mom is a survivor of residential school. Her parents also went to residential school. My oldest sister went to day school, so when I was studying to become a psychologist, I was working in the community, and that's where I really started to kind of be able to expand my perspective about how trauma impacts our communities. I realized that my family and our experience wasn't, an isolated experience, that the trauma that we had experienced, the grief and the loss, it's something that most Indigenous people can relate to, and that disconnection within families is really, I think, the core of what we see happening today with the different forms of violence in the community. That addiction is a spiritual disconnect, and it's a spiritual battle that we're fighting right now to keep our people alive. And part of the way that we can do that is, by just surrounding them. And I think with that love and that compassion, it's actually a really adaptive way of coping. But we know that long term there's really significant impacts, and that it's not really the answer. But sometimes once that spirit of the addiction gets hold of people, it doesn't want to let go. And so I think it takes a whole community really fighting for those lives. And we know that we've already lost enough of our people. I see my role as a psychologist fitting into that, and also working alongside other professionals, all kind of bringing their gifts and working together.
Well, we definitely are in a state of emergency. And I know there's a lot of political connotations that come along with that. When you declare a state of emergency, that's when governments and those in power can act and do something. As we speak now, my family is here, and we're preparing for my 3rd family member, 4th family member. Well, my 2nd child, who died from overdose a week ago, Monday. Tomorrow's her wake. There's no venues open on the reserve right now because of the amount of deaths in our community, and a majority of them are due to fentanyl. We couldn't find a venue to hold my daughter's wake service, so we're having it in my house tomorrow night. And we're just preparing for that right now. And she was, her name is Shawnee Braverock. She's 36 years old. 6 months ago, my granddaughter Tish Morjo died from fentanyl overdose. She would have been she was 19. 11 months prior to that, my oldest son Carl Braverock died to fentanyl overdose. Just before, I think he was 39 years old when he died. 2 weeks ago, we buried my niece Megan Heavy Shields, fentanyl overdose. 2020, 3 years ago, her mother, my sister Bonnie, died, fentanyl overdose. Summer of 2020, my brother PJ, Big Head, died, same thing. So in my immediate family, we're talking my siblings, my children, my grandchildren, my niece, that's a total of PJ, Bonnie, Megan, Carl, Tish, my daughter, 6 members of the Big Head family who've lost loved ones. And words can't even describe how just how devastating that's been for me, for my family. I am now raising the children of my late son, my late daughter. I'm raising their children now. For me, I think that really we have to break the stigma. Okay, that's number one. They aren't just drug addicts on the street. You know, these are my bright, beautiful loved ones that I raised in as best as I could. Was it perfect? No, but I did the best I could with what I had. Secondly, it's you know, those of us, we need to stop judging, and we need to, like I said, break that stigma. Show people who they are. We're putting on a beautiful funeral as best as we can for my daughter, and because I want people to see how beautiful my daughter was. And the other thing is being a little bit more gentler and more kind in our words. Like, I remember people who meant well, but their words were so judgmental. They would say things like, well, I thought he knew better, or well, you did the best you could, or well, we all make our own choices, and that was his choice. And I'd sit there and I'd listen to these well-meaning people who maybe thought they were comforting me, but really all I felt was their judgment towards my son. There will be a time when I know I need to speak a lot louder about this whole fentanyl overdose crisis, but first I just need to get my uncle to Victoria and back home. You know, for me, I need to focus on Ramona.
So we know that, you know, the root of the issues that we're experiencing as Indigenous people is tied back to colonization, to the oppression of our people and our nations. And anytime that, you know, that oppression is present, it has to do with the power dynamics of someone trying to have power over us. And I think that that's really related to all forms of violence that we see. So, you know, it's really the same as the sexual violence that we see, the domestic violence, violence within family systems and against people, the discrimination. Those are all just forms of violence that I think really contribute to that disconnection. My background was working in sexual violence, and then I've also had some background working in domestic violence and addictions. And part of my role as a Blackfoot psychologist is to bring all of those things together. The work that I was doing within the community, I think it tends to be very siloed. So a lot of times, you know, community members, they're sent to one area for addictions, to another area for, you know, domestic violence, sexual violence, and they're all segregated. And so part of my vision for how I want to practice and what I think is really needed is that kind of interconnected approach. So I work a lot with intergenerational trauma, complex trauma, and working in a way that really holds how those things are interconnected, and then just supporting people in, you know, connecting back to themselves, connecting back to their families, to Creator, to the land. I think that all of those things are really the way that we need to heal.